Hi.
Welcome, welcome. This is our very first episode. I'm Caitlin,
I'm Sarah.
and this is Books, Booze,
and Besties.
Yay! I'm so excited to finally get started.
Me too. It feels like we planned this for a little bit and it's finally happening.
I know, we have been talking about a podcast for probably a year now, and we just never could figure out exactly what we wanted to talk about or what we wanted to do, and we just never kind of acted on it. And finally, a few weeks ago, we were like,
let's do the damn thing.
Let's freaking do this. So we we finally figured out that we wanted to talk about books. Books are actually what brought us together.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what brought us into the books that we are talking about today. You want to shed some light on that, Sarah?
Yeah. So we worked together for 2 years. And that's where we became friends, besties. And what really kind of set that in motion was we decided, we both love books. Let's read the same books, kind of start a little book club.
Yeah.
And the book we started with was After and the whole After series. And that's what we're going to start our podcast on.
I'm so excited.
Me too.
This is just awesome. Anyway, so how was your week this week?
Well, it was supposed to be kind of a vacation, a little hiatus from work in between jobs. But, had a little bump in the road.
Naturally.
Yeah.
So what happened?
So basically my puppy had to have a little doggy surgery, but she's good now. She's sleeping, she's healing, she's on the up and up.
I know, she's off camera. She's so pitiful.
So, how was your week?
It was busy. Busy. I have 3 kiddos, ranging in ages from 9 to 10 months old, almost 11 months old. And it was just bam, bam, bam. Every night this week, they all had something to do. Doctor's visits. We had a minor procedure today. Open houses for school because that's coming back at us next week. So we're just really getting ready to hopefully get back into some kind of routine because summer's just been wild. I'm ready for the kids to get back to school. I have one starting kindergarten, so
big step.
I know, my little 5-year-old baby, she's gonna go to kindergarten, and then I got my big boy who's starting 4th grade. But yeah, it's a lot. I'm ready to go back to school though. Summer's the pits. We are autumn lovers.
Yes. Hate the heat.
Yes. I'm not a fan of summer whatsoever.
Nope. I hate sweating.
Yes. Which is a little bit what I'm doing right now because it's just so stinking hot outside. I'm over it. So hopefully that fall weather will be creeping in the next month, which is a positive way of spinning it, but it'll probably be 2 months from now.
It'll be at the end of October.
For real. Yeah. Anyway, so should we get started?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. So as we said, this week we're discussing the After series. So we did want to talk about some trigger warnings.
Yeah.
There's discussion of, a gang rape in this book. Trauma, lots of trauma, emotional abuse, toxic relationships, alcoholism. Am I missing anything?
No, I mean physical aggression.
Yeah.
I mean,
if we come across anything, we'll shout that out before we get to talking on it. But
just a little bit of everything.
Yeah, just a little bit of everything. And the more I looked and was reading, this is a controversial book.
Oh, for sure.
It's controversial. As far as you either love it or you think it is a big pile of trash.
Which, after seeing reading, I mean, because this is my 3rd time reading through the book for the podcast. Right. Just so many things. I mean, the underage drinking, the violence, moving in together after really only getting serious. You know what I mean?
Right.
Just so much happening so fast. I was just comparing it to when I was in high school and I was or in college, and I was I met Thomas and we moved in together, after 9 months, but they decide to get serious, and boom, they're living in an apartment a week later.
Right. They're okay. I think what I had surmised was that they were dating, or not even dating. They had been like kind of like back and forth, fighting. And then finally, after 5 weeks, was when I think they had moved in together. And I wrote that down and I was like, basically, like, WTF. 5 weeks. And that was not even of them dating. That was just of
back and forth.
They met.
Yeah.
And back and forth, fighting, not fighting, hating each other, not hating each other, fooling around, doing like sexual stuff. And then all of a sudden, he decides he wants to be her boyfriend. And then like a few days later, which is a huge red flag.
Red flag.
There's red flags being handed out like a bouquet in this book.
Let's take 5 seconds to tell you what the drink of the week is.
Oh, yeah. Drink of the week.
So I don't know if our listeners have ever read After, but if you have, you know that the very first drink Tessa has is vodka. It's a vodka shot. So obviously we didn't want to just do straight vodka shots during the podcast.
Right. No.
So we did vodka cranberry this week. We did have some vodka shots off the camera, but we're doing vodka cranberry this week. So we got the vodka in there.
It was our first time. Like, this is our first time, so we had to just loosen up just a smidge.
Yeah.
Just to feel comfortable getting on screen. But, yeah, not bad. Not bad. I have, like, 1 shot in my cranberry juice. So.
Same, yeah.
Just enough to sip on throughout the podcast, but that's the booze element of this podcast. Each week, we'll be doing a themed drink.
Yeah.
For each book that we're reading. So next week, which one we'll be doing, like, After We Collided, it will be cherry vodka sours. Yes.
And if you've read the book, you know why. And if you don't, go ahead and read it.
Absolutely. Like, I love this series. And I even wrote in some of this, as a mother, would I want this toxicity for my 2 daughters? Absolutely not. As a therapist, also no.
No.
Like, in session, if you're like, hey, this is what my boyfriend is doing.
Red
flags all over the place. Run away. We talk about toxic relationships, red flags, abusive relationships. Did it keep me from loving this book? Absolutely not.
No, because we both know this is a book. It's not real life. And it's a good book to read. Like, it pulls you in. It's got so much going on.
So much drama. That's, I think the thing that wore me out most about this book was the drama.
Oh, yes. Because literally, even in like one single setting with Tessa and Hardin, it would literally be, you know what, Tessa, I'm going to make this work. We're going to be fine. And then it was, you're pathetic. Why are you here?
Yeah. I mean, my goodness. I was trying to finish it up today and it was chaos, pure and utter chaos. But I feel like we're just kind of jumping around.
So I guess the first thing we would start with is talking about Tessa, the main character.
Yeah, she pops up first thing. Basically, Tessa is going to college. This is her first experience away from home. She is going to college. And I made a note that she's going to a college that she's never, ever been to. She had never even visited this college because she gets there and she's like, it's nothing like the pictures.
Yeah.
Or maybe she says it's everything like the pictures.
Well, immediately, like, talking about, like, discrepancies and stuff, the first one I pointed out was Tessa talks about how she's always super prepared and how she's on top of things. And then she gets there. She doesn't know that the bathrooms are co-ed. She doesn't know the bus schedule, even though she doesn't have a car. It's, like, you can't talk about Tessa's character being so on top of everything and then literally back to back to back things she didn't know.
She's never even visited. I remember when I was starting college, I did a little visit to each I think 2 different colleges, but I ended up going to one of them. But I knew what I was getting myself into, and to see, to hear her talk about, like, I didn't know that it was co-ed. It just goes to show how naive she is.
Well, even besides that, like, Anna Todd literally immediately writes, Tessa saying, I'm on top of everything. I like everything scheduled out, everything planned. And then within the first few chapters, she doesn't know that the bathrooms are co-ed. She doesn't know who her roommate is. And when I was signing up for college, I immediately knew who my roommate was.
I actually met with my roommate before we ever even went to college. Like, we met for dinner.
Yeah.
First thing. And I mean, I would love to hear from some college kids now just to kind of see just what your experience was, because that is not what my experience was. Like, I didn't just show up and not know who my roommate was. You even filled out like a questionnaire.
Yes. Yeah.
That said like no smoking, this, and this. And her roommate were complete opposites, which her roommate actually in the first book is really nice and wants her to participate and wants them to like be friends and get along and do things together, and invites her along for the ride for just about everything. So, I mean, in that case, like, yes, they're different, but, you know, she was still super nice.
Which is a pretty big theme in the book, if I'm being honest. I mean, immediately you notice how judgmental Tessa is. She judges Steph for her piercings, her tattoos, the posters she has on her wall. You know, like, even when Steph takes her to that first party, she's judging Steph's group of friends. She's like, everybody else looks normal. And then you have Steph and Molly and Hardin and Nate and Zed. She's like, they're different. Immediately points out how judgmental she is.
Yeah. Oh, she's super judgmental in that first. She's like, Hardin sitting on the bed. She's like, look at his piercings. You know, why would he do that to himself? And she just, you know, she's very judgmental, very goody two-shoes, very like, I just can't believe they act this way. I can't believe they do these things or look that way. And I was just like, girl, you need to stop. Like, you just need to stop.
Yeah, which that just points out how sheltered she was as a child. I mean, you see Carol, her mother, who's like, you have to dress a certain way, your hair has to look a certain way, you have to be presentable, you have to do X, Y, and Z. So, like, I get why that would be ingrained in Tessa, but it comes out so fast. I mean, she barely gets moved into her dorm and she's immediately judging.
Yeah, I mean, Carol was ready to move her out before they even got situated.
I mean, and Steph turns out to be really nice in this book.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even as I got to the end, which we'll talk more about in a little bit, she was super nice.
Protective even.
Protective of Tessa. So there's that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and to move a little more into that, the relationship with Tessa and Carol is kind of different. Like, very, mom is very, in a way, she's dependent on Tessa to live vicariously through her.
She almost kind of seems like a narcissist. Like,
absolutely.
I literally asked the question, is Carol a narcissist? Because she is, you know, you need to fix your hair, you need to do this and that. I mean, even the day Tessa was moving to her dorm, Carol was like, you need to fix your hair.
Right.
And you're like, well, but Carol has moments where she's like, I really care about you, Tessa. But that's what a narcissist does to keep a person in their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I totally agree. Carol is, it's all about me, and you're projecting my image when you're out there doing the things that you're doing. And even Carol's like, you know, because you're involved with this boy, you are ruining your life. You're doing all this, and that's a reflection of me. And really, it's not. And Tessa's actually not doing any of those things.
No, I mean, Tessa's dad leaves, and then Carol uses Tessa to be what she wanted to be. It's not even like Tessa's her daughter. It's like Tessa is the mold of what she wanted to be.
Yeah.
There is no mother-daughter relationship there.
Like, it's super dysfunctional. Carol is just, she's mean and she's hateful, and she really causes the self-esteem issues in Tessa that are reflected in her relationship with Hardin.
Yeah, I mean, you could ask the question, why does Tessa keep going back to Hardin? Why does she put up with it? Same reason she put up with her mom. That's all she... I mean, she's an 18-year-old child. That's all she knows.
Yeah, she is a pleaser. She's a people pleaser. She wants to please her mother. She wants to be good enough for her mother. And with Hardin, it's like, I want to be what you want me to be.
Yeah, it's one of those typical situations. I found someone who doesn't think I'm perfect, so I'm going to do what I need to be perfect. It doesn't care how she feels about Hardin. It doesn't care how Hardin feels about her. It's ingrained in her to prove herself.
Yeah, absolutely. Because she was just never good enough for her mother.
No.
And that says a lot about her self-esteem issues. But moving on, let's see. So I think I have Tessa's innocence, the ignorance of her, and that goes back into what we were saying, which we can kind of briefly discuss again. Just her ignorance and just her being so naive really put a bad taste in my mouth. Just because, like we said, she was supposed to be so prepared, and she just, you know, it was like, I can't believe that co-eds, you know, the bathrooms are co-ed.
Well, and I kind of want to play off of that. If they want to be so prepared, I know that there were dorm rooms where she would have had her own bathroom or a shared bathroom with her roommate.
Right.
Like, obviously, money was a concern. Tessa talks about my mom had to work so many jobs to provide for us. But if you want this to be the perfect experience, and you talk about how prepared you are, I don't know. I feel like there would have been a lot more effort.
Same. But we can move on from the dysfunctional relationship because it comes back in every book. So we can move on from that. I feel like I really nitpicked that while I was reading it again because, you know, this time we're going through and we're actually reading it for purpose, not for entertainment. So I was really nitpicky as far as like their relationship with each other. So kind of jumping back, we can talk about Noah for a minute.
Oh, yeah.
Almost too perfect.
Yeah. I don't know if... I'm guessing he has those stereotypical suburban parents. I mean, how do you get a kid that's rich, white, and nice? Those don't usually add up, which I guess you could kind of see it when he judges Harden. Maybe he's not so nice, but he knows how to put up a good front.
Yeah. And, you know, he's like, I got this from the Gap, which is just funny. It's just a funny little add-in.
Yeah.
But, yeah, he's almost too perfect. That was a little different for me.
I mean, Tessa didn't even notice that Noah wore loafers all the time until Harden pointed out to her.
With a penny in them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've never met an 18-year-old that wore loafers, but I don't know.
No.
I'm also not 18. I haven't been for a long time. You've been closer to 18 than I have. So
I don't see any 18-year-old males wearing a cardigan either. So, or any that even know what Gap is.
That's funny. I know Old Navy, but
yeah,
I guess that's the same. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. And Noah talking to her mother behind her back whenever he doesn't like the actions that she's taken.
This relationship it's not even a relationship. She immediately, when Noah is brought up in her mind, is like, yeah, he's like a little brother to me. That is so awkward. Why are you in a relationship with him then? He's a friend, not a boyfriend. And if you look at him as a little brother, you should not be making out with him.
He's her mother's keeper.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
The fact that he reports everything that she does that drove me crazy. Because thank goodness Tessa at one point was like, can you please stop telling my mother everything? And I was like, good for you, Tessa, because that's really freaking annoying.
Well, that's awkward. But if you're literally sitting there saying he's like a little brother to me, why were you ever in a relationship with him? Like, I get it, your mom, but still.
Right. I think that was all about pleasing mom, wanting to do what mom does, you know, wanting to make her happy. But, yeah, that was really annoying. And I hated that whole aspect because he was like, your mom's really disappointed in you. And she was like, why the fuck did you tell her anything? She didn't say that, but that was me. I was like, why?
That's so awkward.
Yes. Just stop, Noah. Just stop. He was very pretty, you know, perfect, you know, wouldn't even like do more than make out, which is fine. That's your choice. But if I know 18-year-old boys, and most of them, if you've been in a relationship for like 2 years or more,
you're doing more than making out.
Even if you're not having like sex, which is cool. You're doing more than just making out and then being like, no, we need to stop doing whatever we're doing. It's getting a little heated, you know, anyway.
Well, and that brought a point to me when you were talking about Noah telling her mom. like, the first thing he told on her on was for going to a party, but it's like, well, if your mom controls your entire life and you're sheltered, of course you're gonna go out and rebel when you get to college. You've got freedom. The first thing you're gonna do is abuse it.
That's exactly right. Even though, like, I don't really think that was Tessa's intention.
Oh, no. Mm-mm.
I think, it was back to like, well, my roommate really wants this of me. I am a doormat for everybody else. I'm a doormat starting with my mother. I'm going to do what other people want me to do. And I feel like that's like a huge theme in all of these books. Like, I'm a people pleaser. I'm going to be a doormat. I'm going to allow people to do whatever they need to do. And here I am. I'm just here to, pour from an empty cup, basically, because I am not getting anything I need, but I'm giving everybody everything else. And
it wasn't until at that party, Hardin literally shat on her about not ever drinking that she literally took the shot. She, from the very beginning of her experience in college, did not do anything that would be considered rebellious until Hardin basically said she wouldn't.
Yeah. So, I mean, even Tessa had only been at school for 1 week before she was drinking and making out with Hardin in his bedroom. It was like she was just like quick to give in. And I empathize with that because, she's at college. She's not being monitored by her mother 24/7. She wants to fit in, but she's obviously noticing like the people around me are kind of assholes. Like, they're just here, they're laughing at me. They are not my friends. And I don't know, like, she just gave up really quick. Like, I was expecting more, I guess, not just like a weekend, I'm getting wasted.
I think she just wanted to have a group of people she fit in with.
Right.
So bad that she just immediately jumped on that bandwagon, because at that point, the only person she could find that she could possibly relate to was Landon, and the only time she saw him was in the 2 classes they shared.
Yeah. Definitely. And Landon, I love Landon.
I know.
He's such a good character. It makes it platonic immediately. Like, you never sense that, like, there could be more here, which I love. I love, that they can have that male-female dynamic without trying to throw, like, love triangle, because, they're all big. Everyone's big about the love triangle.
Yeah.
But Landon was a really good character. I really enjoyed any time he was in it, because he didn't care to put Hardin in his place. He didn't care to be real with Tessa. He was just a neutral character. And I loved it.
I guess Hardin.
Yeah, we've been talking about Tessa for a long time. So I guess we can get into the relationship between Tessa and Hardin.
Yeah.
Immediate red flags.
Oh, yeah. No, she only wanted what she couldn't have. Yeah. And that's kind of the same for him, too. The only thing that intrigued him in the beginning was he saw this girl that was nothing like any girl he's hooked up with or had any kind of relationship with before, and she immediately turned him down.
All right. So, after a little break, we're coming back and discussing the relationship with Hardin and Tessa.
So, we started off by talking about red flags immediately into their relationship.
Right. Anger, toxicity. He gets jealous over every little thing.
I mean, the very first time he saw Tessa in his room, he was like, his room in the fraternity house. He's like, don't touch my fucking shit. Oh, yeah. He's like, do not touch my stuff. He was mad, but he'd also just made a bet, so he took advantage of it.
Right. Which we'll come back to this when we get to Before, which is the last book of the series. Just timelines are so out of whack in this book.
Oh, for sure. I hate it's so hard to keep up with, because even at the very end, when Tessa's finding out about the bet and Molly's telling Tessa about details, I'm like, I can't keep it straight. She talks about Hardin faking being drunk and coming to Tessa's dorm room.
Yeah.
And then she talks about Tessa actually giving it up. And Jace just comes out of nowhere.
Yeah. I mean,
he's not in the first 30 chapters, and then boom, he's there.
Yeah. Then all of a sudden he's there, but he's there to be a toxic entity that adds into, I guess, what is supposed to be motivating Hardin to keep this bet going. But
which is another discrepancy I have, because he's not there when the bet is made. He's not there when the video is recorded. He's not there for any of that. And then you get to the very end when Tessa's finding out about the bet, and he's like, no, Hardin, you need to tell her. And I'm like, you weren't even there. Jace is not there when the bet is made in the book whatsoever. He's nowhere around for many chapters after the bet is even made. And then when Tessa finds out about the bet, he's like, Hardin, you need to tell her, and this and that. He came in at the last minute, so he has no part of this bet to begin with.
Yeah, he just kind of pops up out of nowhere when they're supposed to be a part of dating, they're actually dating. Yeah, I think he's just there as supposed to be, a negative influence on Hardin, and someone Hardin is actually supposed to be afraid of. And the whole thing is just weird. The timeline, which discrepancies we can get into in a few minutes. I've had a beef with the discrepancies in this book.
Since we read it.
For a long time. For 2.5 years.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of issues with the discrepancies in this book. While I still love the book, it definitely pulls me out. But we'll come back to that.
You want to dive into Hardin, I guess?
Yeah, let's dive into Hardin.
So, the first thing that jumps out to me for Hardin, which, obviously immediately he's an ass. But what gets me is when he takes Tessa to his favorite spot. And that's the only time in the entire, spoiler alert, series, he takes her to this spot.
Whole thing's a spoiler alert. So if you're listening, you should have probably already read the book. Just pointing that out.
But, that's the only time they ever go to this so-called favorite spot.
Yeah. Yeah, they never mention it again. He never goes there that we know of. Because we know later in the books, he does have his version of events. He never mentions going back to this place. You're like, okay.
And, after learning about the bet and things, it kind of makes sense that maybe it was not a favorite spot. He just found somewhere he could take Tessa for them to be alone and him pretty much take advantage of her, which is what I'm going to call it. Obviously, she consented to the sexual things. But if she had known what was going on behind the scenes, never would she have ever gone anywhere with him.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I agree. He was just playing her because they had the bet going on.
Yep.
Which, obviously we know that the bet was just a ruse because he did want to spend more time with him. He obviously has love for her and he has feelings for her. But he was so traumatized, and so angry. He did not know how to just be, I don't like the word normal, but he wanted to normalize their interactions. In order to do that, he had to put on this persona and this ruse of, I'm a badass. I'm only doing this because I'm in a bet and I'm doing this on purpose. But in reality, he's like, I am intrigued by this girl. But I have to put on a front because I don't want to lose that reputation that I have.
Right, yeah. I mean, to Tessa, he wanted to be a boyfriend. To his friends, he wanted to be this badass that doesn't care about anyone. To his dad, he wanted to seem normal. I mean, he didn't correct Ken when Ken was like, is this your girlfriend? I mean, he literally dressed up for their dinner, even though that's not Hardin. So, he was a different person for every single person in his life.
Yeah. Hardin just has so much backstory. He's got that relationship with his dad. That's, he's really at this point in their relationship, he's the toxic entity. Not so much dad. Dad, while we know what dad has done and what his actions ended up causing, which almost makes you not like Ken. But then again, you're like, you know, as us as a therapist, we're like, he's on the positive end of the things, you know, where he's trying to make amends and he's trying to do things right. He wants to build this relationship with his son, but his son's so traumatized from his past actions, and he's so angry. There's so much anger in Hardin, that it's really hard to just move past the things that Ken has done, because we want to see the positive aspects of Hardin, but he makes it so difficult. So I empathize with Hardin, and I see that Ken is trying to do better.
Which, foreshadowing, obviously we've read the entire series, so like we learn the backstory of Ken. We learn why he made the choices he did. We learned what happened to Hardin's mom. And looking from the outside in, it's easy for Hardin to blame Ken when he doesn't know the whole story. But once you know the whole story, there's really no one to blame. It was just a coincidence. It was bad timing and a shitty situation.
Yeah, it's really sad because we know everything that happened. While that doesn't excuse Ken's behavior, you understand more. You can empathize with him more.
Right.
And so in this book alone, we don't know that yet. It's just really hard to get through that and empathize with Ken, I guess. Even though you can see he's trying to do different, and, you know, which Hardin only sees the here and the now. He sees like Ken is doing well. He's basically giving this this relationship to these people that, I don't know, I wanted to have that sober relationship with you. And now he's like, you're giving that to somebody else. I'm not getting that. It's not fair. And that just is so much, that adds so much additional anger. Hence, you know, him going to their house.
Right.
And just basically like messing shit up.
Right. I mean, I can definitely see what sparks Hardin's anger, but also he seems a little, I don't want to say ironic, maybe judgmental. You can't blame your dad for all the, you can. That's what happens. You can blame your dad for all the wrong he's done and then turn around and use him for a free education and the best house in the fraternity house, and everything is taken care of for you. So either you hate your dad and want nothing to do with him, or you take advantage of him.
Well, I think in Hardin's mind, he's owed that. He's like, you've done me dirty. You left us to live in squalor, basically. And now you owe me money. You owe me this stuff that I need at school. You owe me that relationship that we didn't have, but I'm not willing to put forth that effort.
Right.
But yeah, that just goes along with a lot of Hardin's trauma. You know, not only did he witness his mom being gang raped, he, you know, is now trying to build a relationship with the man who he feels caused it. Because you can't place blame or anger on the men that did it because you don't know them. He has to have that entity.
He has to have someone to blame.
Yeah, he has to have that entity of like, you're here right now, and I'm going to be angry with you. You suck. You caused this, and now look at you. You're trying to live this perfect life with this perfect family, and I'm just your forgotten son.
Which is why he hates Landon so much. It's not that Landon did anything wrong. It's that he looks at Landon as the son Ken wanted. Yeah.
Landon portrays everything that he wasn't. Landon got everything that he did not get. And that pisses Hardin off.
And I think that's another kind of downfall to the book. Landon plays this side character that helps Tessa out, that feeds Hardin, that supports Ken and Karen, but you never learn his backstory. For all we know, he and Karen grew up poor, had the hardest life, and then Ken helped them. Or maybe he was a privileged boy. Yeah. Who knows? But for a privileged boy, he would have been hella nice.
Yeah. He's so nice. I still love Landon.
Yeah. Landon is probably the best character in the whole series.
Yeah. I guess we can move forward to like Tessa and Hardin's actual relationship, even though how brief it is.
Yeah.
I mean, they meet. I think, there's initial attraction on both parts, even though they definitely want to deny it.
I mean, they literally make out when Tessa comes to him because that guy's stalking her in the fraternity house.
Week 2. That's her second
That
weekend.
is the first person she goes to.
Yeah. So I definitely think there's that chemistry there. Even if they both are like, you're not my type, I'm going to pretend I don't see you. I'm pretend I don't like you. You're definitely on my radar, even though I don't want you to be.
Right. Well, and after reading through the book again, I was like, you can literally tell so early on how Hardin truly feels, because he talks about no one's allowed in my room is locked, I don't sleep with girls in my room. The first time he's going to do anything sexual with Tessa at the lake, he literally gives her the choice. We can do it here, or I can take you back to my room.
Yeah.
That's never been an option for any girl before Tessa.
Yeah. And I mean, this book, for all of its negative aspects, it pulled me in. I felt so many emotions with this book. Every little thing that happened between them, I was like desperate to have more. I read through these books in like 5 days, and they are long, especially the second and third one. But their relationship is just, there's so many different dynamics to it. Like, there's the back and forth, which does become exhausting at points.
Oh, for sure. I mean, even like, especially that night, Landon has Tessa come over and they're in the backyard. It's literally 1 second. Tessa wants to be there. She doesn't want to be there. She wants to be there. She doesn't want to be there. She stays. And Hardin's like, I'm glad you're here. I hate you're here. You're pathetic. Stay. Don't leave me.
Yeah.
It's, the 180s are so annoying.
Yes. And then, we move forward to the next weekend where she's getting dressed up and she's going out, and she's hanging out with the guys at, all of them at the restaurant. And then Hardin's like, I'll give you a ride home. And, basically like flaunting Molly in her face. And she's like, oh, well, I'm going to call Noah. And Noah, we know that she's not calling Noah because her and Noah are still split.
No.
They're talking about getting back together at that point, but it's nothing major. But, we see like they're just taunting each other at this point. And then they finally get to a point where they're like admitting their feelings to each other. And he, she spends a few nights at the frat house, and then all of a sudden he's ditching her again. He's like, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna party, but he doesn't say anything to her. And when she shows up, Molly's sitting in his lap. That made me so mad.
Yeah, because he literally, a few chapters before that, was like, yeah, no, Molly's annoying. I only hang out with her because she's fun.
Yeah, like she's part of the group. That's the only reason I see her. And then she shows up and Molly's sitting in his lap. And that made me so mad because I'm like, Hardin, what are you doing, dude? Like, just a few chapters, you were chasing her and getting her to break up officially with Noah. And now here you are being an asshole again. And this book draws out more emotions.
Yes.
Than a lot of the books I've read.
I know, because 1 second you're like totally like and completely invested, like you feel it in your heart. You're like, oh my god, this is happening. I love this for them. Like the scene where they go over for dinner and Hardin asks her to stay and they have their real first intimate moment, and like everything is good. Yeah. And then in the next chapter he's ditching her, he's ignoring her, and like as an outside person looking in, it's because he's scared of his feelings. He's scared of this and that.
He's scared of being, like, betrayed like he was with his father. And, it sounded like his mom did the best she could. But he's just got so much trauma and anger.
Yes.
But then, even that night at the party when he's got Molly on his lap, it's back and forth again at the frat house between them. And then he's like, I love you. You know, he makes that declaration after they've been fighting and they're kissing other people. And it's just like back and forth, back and forth. And I'm like, my goodness, just pick a side.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're still at that point, I think it's just halfway through the whole book.
Right, yeah.
And then, you know, of course, then he takes it back the next day. He's like, nah, I don't love you. Forget it. I didn't even mean to say that again. And you're just like, here we go again. So the next weekend, they finally are admitting they're in love. And this is, at this point, I went back and looked, and this is 5 weeks. She has been at school for 5 weeks.
Yep.
And this is where they're like, we're in love. We are going to move forward in our relationship. And another red flag, let's move in together. He is desperate to move in with her. And that's just a huge red flag. Again, we're like, what's going on? Why is he so desperate to move in with her?
I mean, and throughout this whole process, you know, Zed's popping up occasionally, and you kind of start to like Zed. You're like, okay, he's kind of this knight in shining armor that shows up when he needs to. Yeah. And it's not until the end where you're like, wow, he was just as much of a piece of shit as Hardin. Yeah. Because if Tessa had decided, you know what, Zed's the one I like, not Hardin, same thing would have happened with Zed.
Yeah. Well, he tries to like take a step back at times. He still never told her. And he still never like did anything to end the bet.
He tries to win her over when she dresses up. She lets Steph make her over that night at the restaurant. He literally tries to win her over because he's going to go through with it then.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And then, well, the thing about Tessa, which I know I'm kind of jumping back a little bit, she doesn't know how to be alone.
No.
Homegirl does not know how to be alone. She literally is like Noah, Hardin, Zed. Throw Noah back in there at some point.
Hardin.
I'm going to stick with Hardin, and we'll talk about the other books later. But it's the same shit, different story. I mean, literally. It's the same thing. She just keeps bouncing back and forth. I'm like, girl.
Which, and another thing.
You learn to be alone with yourself. Learn to love yourself.
Right, yes.
Because obviously we know throughout that her self-esteem is low. She really needs some confidence. She needs some self-esteem. She needs to learn to love herself before she's willing to like jump in, which, you know, is something that comes back up in the last book. But
yeah, and
just in this book, you're screaming at her like, stop bouncing around from guy to guy. Learn your worth. That just drove me crazy.
Well, and she was dependent on her mom for so long. And then, I mean, she even mentions how the night her dad left, Noah was the one that came to her rescue, basically. So she was dependent on Noah for so long. And then eventually it just turned into her boyfriend. She doesn't know how to not depend on herself.
Right. No, I totally agree.
Well, and I think talking about Hardin, another way he really pulled her in is he's like, yeah, no, I make all these girls happy that I'm with. Like, they're just here for fun. But in the entire 600-page book, the only 2 girls that are mentioned besides Tessa is Molly and Steph. So where are all these girls he's really making happy?
Yeah.
No girls are coming out and, you know, jealous of Tessa. No girls are coming to warn her. You don't see girls all over him at parties. I mean, she mentions, like, once in the book that girls were staring at Hardin, but that's it. Yeah. So it's just another ruse to get her latched on to him.
For sure. So another thing I discussed, or, you know, I noted when I was reading was my physical reactions to some of the parts of the book. Like, I don't think I've ever felt as strongly in some parts that I did on this book. Like, the build up to what is Hardin doing at that party with, you know, when she goes in, she sees Molly on his lap, and I was like, damn it, Hardin. what are you doing? Like, you just got her to dump her boyfriend, and now you're like back to being this douchebag. And then, you know, of course, the very end where he disappears. And she's like, you know what? I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to go find him. I'm going to figure out what's going on. And then she shows up. And once, you know, they start talking, and she finally starts realizing there's something bigger going on that she doesn't even know about. Your stomach, just my stomach at least, started to sink.
Right, because that last chapter is so, I mean, like, every other chapter is like 6-7 pages, and then you get to the final chapter, and it's like 20 pages long.
It was, I think, like, I can't remember, don't quote me on this. I was at page 559, and that was when that chapter started, where she actually showed up at the restaurant. And I was like, oh my gosh, you know, I knew something big was happening. And it's almost like you can feel what she's feeling. And she's humiliated. She's just completely repulsed. And she's like, what the hell? But I don't want to talk about the last chapter yet. We're not, you know.
Right.
There's a few things before there I want to talk about, which... So they finally, you know, he convinces her to move in with him. And, you know, you're like, you're 5 weeks. You haven't even really been dating. And I am curious to how much money he has in the bank account. Because, I mean, he's like got a deposit and all this stuff, which I know they said some of the bet money.
Right.
Did all that.
Which also confused me, because these are college kids. Where the hell are they getting enough money to pay an apartment down payment?
Right. And her car payment, or her car, she got her car, he painted her car.
Like, how do these kids have enough money to afford that?
Right. It's just, I was like, that's a lot of money. And I know he said he saved a lot of money, but it just, you know.
How? He's always fucking around.
It doesn't add up to me. It just never added up to me. There's several things in the book that just doesn't add up to me. So, you know, they move in together. Tessa, you know, he helps with getting her the internship at Vance. Oh, I want to discuss something related to discrepancies when we get to that portion, because, you know, we talked about discrepancies is a big part, and it's something I've thought about for a long time.
You're right.
So, yeah. Their relationship is so toxic, but it also makes you root for them at the same time.
Right, yeah, because on the surface, she's this judgmental, entitled girl, and he's this entitled douche. And then you find out beneath, you know, both of them were abandoned by alcoholic fathers around the same age. Both of them had mothers that worked their asses off to get these kids where they were. So you can relate to them. You can feel for them. And so as toxic as their relationship is, you're still rooting for them.
Absolutely. Like, you can tell he loves her. And you can tell, like, I felt that the chemistry between their characters. I did feel like they were in love, and they, you know, wanted to make this work. Neither of them didn't know how.
Right.
You know, they were still so young. She's 18, he's 20. They just didn't know how. They didn't know how to, you know, move forward without their pasts and their, you know, traumas weighing them down. But you definitely felt the chemistry between their characters, and you felt the love that they had for each other, even though it had been such a short amount of time. Like, you know, you read some books and you're like, I didn't feel anything there. There wasn't any chemistry. But you felt that between Tessa and Hardin immediately. Like, I could feel the tingles. I could feel the butterfly in my stomach, the butterflies, you know.
Yeah.
Every time they were in a scene together, it just made me smile, even if they were fighting. And, you know, I was like, they just have to be able to overcome this toxicity and move forward. So. And
even in situations like with Hardin, of course, you know, he tells Tessa, you know, I've been 6 months sober. You don't learn until later, like, how important that is, like, what a big step that is.
Right.
But in that moment, you're like, wow, this kid's 6 months sober at, like, 18, 19. Like, I don't know what he's been through, but that's pretty impressive for someone at his age to be able to do on his own.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a big deal. And, we'll see more of that throughout all the books.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so basically she gets, her job and they seem to be doing okay for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then, they're living together and he leaves and he doesn't come home for like a day and a half.
Right.
And you're just like hardened, like still, like
you
dude.
convinced her to get an apartment with you.
Yeah, and then he goes and he's like, well, really, I pay for this apartment.
And he was so adamant for her name to be on the lease.
Yeah. And it's just so frustrating because, like we said, at one point, you're wanting them to make a go of it. You want them to be able to find happiness and all the crap that they've been through.
Mm-hmm.
But then you're like, Harden, you're a total douchebag. And I think she needs to just peace out right now.
Mm-hmm.
And you're so frustrated with him and you get so mad at him because you're like, why are you such an asshole? And,
right.
So you find out what happened with like his mom being gang raped.
Mm-hmm.
And, and then you feel a little better for him. You feel like, oh my gosh, he's been through so much, nobody witnesses something like that without it playing a major role in their later in life. But you still want him to get his shit together.
Mm-hmm.
And, which leads us back to the end.
Mm-hmm.
The major plot twist.
Right, yeah. As back and forth as this book was, as toxic as it was, I never saw the ending coming.
Absolutely not. Especially the situation with the sheets.
I know.
That disgusted me the most.
Obviously, it was foreshadowing. I know, looking back on it, he still had it. But as a 19-year-old, who keeps a used condom anyways? That's disgusting.
Yeah, that bothered me because, I read that part today and they were like, the condom and then the sheets. And I'm like, you dirty bastard.
Right. And it wasn't even about the money. Looking back, you're like, he literally just did it to keep that reputation. That's all he cared about.
Even at the end, he was still fighting to keep that reputation. And, I don't know really where he thought she wasn't going to find out because obviously Jace was gunning to inform her of what had been going on. Mm-hmm. Molly was never going to keep that a secret.
No, she would have told her weeks ago if given the chance. That's why Harden locked Tessa away in that apartment.
Yeah, he did not want her to socialize with him. That's why he freaked out when he got to the restaurant. So basically, when the big reveal is coming out, my heart sank. Mm-hmm. I felt that sense of sadness, that sense of humiliation. Anna Todd did such a good job at making you feel those feelings. Mm-hmm. And I was in tears at the end. I was like, poor Tessa, because that would be humiliating. I don't care if I dislike Tessa or not. That's horrific. That is a traumatizing experience. And I was super glad when she ditched Harden when he was on his knees. She's like, mm-hmm. Bye. And she ran off and jumped in the car with Zed, who we find out is also a key player in the bet.
Which, that's another thing, going back to her being so dependent on someone else. The second Zed was like, no, you can't drive yourself. Let me drive you. She's like, okay, yeah, you're right. Girl, I would get in that car and I would go. I don't care if I get stuck anywhere. I'd call my mom.
Yeah.
I'm not depending on anyone else in that moment.
Yeah, all y'all have screwed me over. Mm-hmm. Steph seemed like she was remorseful. Yeah, mm-hmm. Steph seemed remorseful, but overall, none of them gave a shit about her.
And Tessa even mentioned that in the beginning, these aren't my friends, they're making fun of me, why do I let them make fun of me? And then she continued to do it because she was obsessed with the idea of hardening her.
Yeah. I think she just was seeking so much acceptance. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so that, the whole thing was just heartbreaking, and that's really where the book ends. And, we'll go into the next book for our next time, but we did definitely want to touch on discrepancies.
Right, yes.
Because that That's been something we've talked about for a long time. So do you want to start or?
Well, I feel like we kind of mentioned one discrepancy already, like talking about Tessa and how she talks about, I'm a perfectionist. Everything has a plan. Everything is down to a detail. And then she literally gets to college in the first, 3 chapters. Yeah. And this bitch doesn't even know who her roommate.
Well, so little key detail that I've always noticed was, okay, in the first, I think, chapter, maybe, I'm not 100% sure. It's definitely in the first 2 chapters. She makes the comment of, whenever I left the house, I had to have my hair perfect. I had to have my eyebrows plucked. I had to do this, A, B, and C to be perfect in my mother's eyes. Then when she's getting her makeover with Steph to go out to dinner, Steph plucks her eyebrows and she's like, it's the worst experience, worse than I ever imagined it could be. Right. And I'm like, wait a second. And I know that's like itty bitty, just a little detail.
Right. No, I was going to build off of that. Like, one of my discrepancies is literally like, if Tessa was supposed to be this perfect child, present so well, one of the first things she does when she gets to college is goes to buy more clothes. Why don't you have more clothes? And when Hardin makes fun of her burgundy dress, she's like, well, I don't have that many dresses. What?
But in other times, she's like, my mom made sure that I had clothes and I was presented perfectly.
How?
Yeah, that bothered me
so much. You have no
much.
clothes, but you always presented perfect. You have limited dresses.
Yeah.
But you were perfect.
Yeah. And the way she talks about her mother just in the whole thing is just weird and it doesn't add up. But anyway, we talked about that earlier, but I want to stick with discrepancies. Tessa's job and just the timeline in general of this whole story. I don't know if anybody else noticed, but she gets a job. And I reread this to make sure that I was right. I wrote down she's supposed to be working 2 days a week. She is supposed to be going to her job, I think like Tuesdays and Thursdays every week. She gets this job right off the bat. She legit goes to this job every single day. And I'm like, but then she's still talking about how she's only working 2 days a week. I'm like, what you did doesn't make any sense.
Well, and another discrepancy with that is when her mom and her boyfriend are dropping her off at the dorm, they're like, when are you going to go look for cars? When are you going to go look for a job? She's like, next week. 3 weeks later, she tells Noah, next week.
Well, when Noah comes to see her that second time, because the first time he shows up, and it's with her mother after she parties all night. Well, she calls him the next weekend. She's like, I know that this will keep me from going to a party. Right. I'm going to call Noah. And on the phone, she's like, I haven't seen you in almost 2 weeks. I was like, well, actually, you just saw him a week ago. And the biggest discrepancy of them all in this whole book is when... in this first book, there's discrepancies throughout the entire series. But this discrepancy is the timeline. Right.
No, Anna Todd wants you to feel like it's months long.
Yeah.
And when you get down to the math, it's literally a 5-week period of time. Yeah. Which is a lot to cram into 5 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much. Everything that happens, the whole 600-page book happens in 5 weeks. But... at the end, when it ends, it's supposed to be December. It's supposed to be like right before Christmas.
And she started school at the end of August, beginning of September.
Right.
She didn't even have a fall break. The fall break doesn't even have...
No fall break, no holidays, no Halloween, no Thanksgiving, which Halloween is mentioned later. Or no, I'm sorry, Thanksgiving in another book is mentioned. But you're like...
there's way too much back and forth with the timeline. It's totally messed up.
Yeah.
And if you look at it, for 5 weeks, that's a shit ton of stuff that happens in 5 weeks for there not to be more details. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't talk about Tessa on her own ever. It doesn't, I don't even know if this kid eats. It never once talk about this kid eating. It talks about her only showering when it's convenient for the storyline.
Yeah. The whole thing, the whole timeline, there's just so many discrepancies throughout the whole book. but that always bothered me. I was like, okay, have you ever seen Elf, the movie? Which I know is kind of weird, but do you know when the dad and Elf's dad, Buddy's dad, he leaves the page out of the book, and the guy's like, where the hell is this page? You let this go to print and it's missing a page. I don't know how this A, B, and C happened because there's a page missing. And I'm like, Anna Todd messed up this timeline in this book, just like, his dad left out this whole page. Like, it's just missing this whole big plot aspect because for some reason you decided that in 5 weeks it was going to go from the end of August to December. Like, there's just so much. I hate that. Like, it pulls me out of the story because I start thinking about, well, how did you get from here to here when there's this huge plot hole? Like, I don't want to say plot hole, actually. I want to say timeline discrepancy.
Right, yeah. Which I think for most readers, they probably don't pay attention to that. But for us to be who we are, to be literal therapists that notice every little detail, it's hard for us to pass up on that because, like, I get it. She wanted significant time to pass. But you can't keep saying next weekend.
Right.
Like, we're going to notice that that's 5 weeks. You had them move in after 5 weeks, a week after she lost her virginity.
Yeah.
Like, it's... No.
Yeah, it was really frustrating. It just pulls me out of the book because I'm like, where was the editing there? Why didn't someone say, like, hey, you left a bunch of weeks out of this. You jumped months. We need to go back and, like, fix the wording. You could have said a few weeks went by. Instead it was, she let you know that it was every weekend consecutively versus, a few weeks went by and we did A, B, and C, but it was never that. And now we've just got, like, these massive timeline holes that really bother me. And there's continuing discrepancies throughout the next 3.5 books. We'll say before is a 0.5.
Well, and jumping back on discrepancies, I mean, like, it talks about how involved Carol is in Tessa's life. Tessa decides to cut her mom off in one weekend, and Carol's not up her ass after that.
Yeah.
Like, Carol doesn't come back into play until the next book.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
That does not add up. So, talking about Carol, like, you can't talk about how involved your mom is with your entire life, so concerned with your looks, the way you present yourself, your academics, everything, and then you tell your mom off, and she just vanishes.
She drops off the face
for the rest of the book.
Well, I mean, even when Noah calls her after that first weekend and he makes the comment later, he's like, your mom's still disappointed in you. Why hasn't Carol reached out to Tessa straightforward and been like, what the heck have you been up to?
Well, and it doesn't even make sense because she breaks up with Noah and Carol's up her ass, like, literally comes to the dorm.
Yeah.
Tessa goes to 2 parties, gets drunk at one of them, and Carol tells Noah she's disappointed. Right. It does not even make sense.
Yeah. None of that made any sense to me, but there's just the discrepancies they drive me crazy.
I know. I mean...
But I think, like, like I wrote, like, the timeline is the biggest discrepancy that bothers me. And moving forward, and, like, that after we collided, after we fell, and after Ever Happy, there continues to be discrepancies.
The timeline is what screws everything up, because if it's only 5 weeks, I can see Carol not reaching out to Tessa right away. But that's a shit ton of stuff to put in 5 weeks. If Anna Todd really wanted it to be from, like, the end of August to Christmas, then Carol definitely should have been more involved. Why was Tessa and Hardin only living together for a week before the friends confronted Tessa?
Yeah.
I mean, like, obviously Tessa went out of her way for that to happen, but still.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a lot. I just need to know why the editor didn't step in.
I think it was one of those things where they were like, there's so much going on here, everybody's going to love it and move forward with it.
Yeah, there's so much drama and back and forth. Nobody's going to notice that there's a massive 2-month missing timeline.
Right.
But I noticed.
So did I. I mean, it is your stereotypical fanfic. So, I mean, I get it. I do.
And I still love it, and I still read it when I get an itch. The chemistry is just so good. And she did a good job at developing the characters, even in book 1.
Right. Yeah, because even when you start to hate Tessa or you start to hate Hardin, they throw in shit like, yeah, my dad was an alcoholic. He left me when I was 10, and my mom worked her ass off to support us. Well, hell yeah, I support you 110%, even if you are fucking annoying, Tessa.
For real. Or like, Hardin, I know you're an angry asshole, but, I can empathize or I can sympathize with the things that you've been through. And I want you to have a happy ending. I want you to work through all that trauma. But my goodness, it's exhausting waiting for you to get to that point.
For real. I mean, 600 pages is a lot for that back and forth. For it to be 5 weeks, I could have saw maybe 300 pages. But
yeah, it's very
detailed for there to be no detail, if that makes sense.
No, I totally agree. But yeah, I think we had wanted to talk. We're like, how do we air these discrepancies?
Right.
For 2.5 years now since we read it for the first time, and we're like, okay, here we go. Look, we've been talking about this all week. How are we going to air these discrepancies? But yeah, so I think we're winding down now. Did you want to add anything? I feel like we've covered a whole lot of stuff in this.
No, I feel like for book 1, the biggest things to cover would have been Tessa, Hardin, and the discrepancies, which we've pretty much hit all of those out of the ballpark.
And just some of their relationships with each other. So no, I think that's fantastic. All right, guys. So next time, we are going to be putting out 3 episodes at one time. So you guys should be, when this comes out, you'll also have access to the After We Collided review and the After We Fell review.
Right. Yeah.
So it'll be out August 17th, which you guys will already know that because that'll be right now. If you want to get with us, we are on Twitter at Books, Booze, and Besties.
Yes.
We are on Instagram at Books and Besties Pod. And we are on Facebook at Books, Booze, and Besties.
Right.
And
if you need to email us for anything, I think it's
Books and Besties Podcast at Gmail. Sorry, we're still learning everything and getting everything down pat. It's still new to us. So, email, write in any suggestions you have for books. We love to read. We're going to be doing any genre.
Right, yes. We may call you all smuts, but we're down for anything.
Yes. We love the romance. Don't get us wrong, but we are always open to all genres. Like we just love to read in general. That's really what our friendship started with. And that's still, even to this day, we're like, you have to read this book. We're messaging each other constantly. You have to read this book. And so we're open to anything. Please send anything in that you guys think, would be fun to go over in a podcast. But that's all I got.
Yeah. And you know what our next 3-4 episodes will be about? So if you have any suggestions, definitely send those in. We will definitely get to them after we finish with the After series. And you know where to find us.
Yeah. All right.
See you next chapter, smuts. Bye.
Bye.